Altaie, who's from the Altaie School of Physics and Astronomy. Muhammad Basil Altaie is an Iraqi physicist, philosopher, and professor of theoretical physics. Professor Altaie has a notable academic background, having completed his PhD in theoretical physics at the University of Manchester in 1978. He has worked at the University of Mosul since 1999 and also at the Yarmouk University in Jordan. Professor Altaie is recognized for engaging in a dialogue between Islam and science and seeking a theistic, interpretation of science based on Islamic concepts. He argues that quantum interdependency lends credibility to Islamic theism, suggesting that universe's predictability and indeterminism are evidence of divine wisdom and continuous creation. He's authored several works, including The Divine Word and the Grand Design, Interpreting the Quran in the Light of Modern Science, and God, Nature, and the Cause, Essays on Islam and Science, and Islam and Natural Philosophy.
I'm pleased to contribute to this session of studies on the AI service to the Quran. And my contribution will be concentrating on new frontiers in Islamic study of the Quran. Colleagues has already have enlightened these discussions showing the potential of artificial intelligence in the Quranic scholarships and the advanced natural language processing in this respect, perhaps. In fact, we need to develop further this subject, much more further, as far as it is related to the Quranic studies, because very few, as far as I can see from the literature, very few serious studies has been contributed to this field. We have to pay attention to the importance of contemporary scientific knowledge when we consider Quranic interpretation. Part of the Quran, as you know, is also speaking about natural phenomena, describing things sometimes very accurately, which I showed in my book, The Divine Word and the Grand Design, where I have corrected a lot of wrong translations, for example, which doesn't match the actual scientific meaning of that part, especially in astrophysics. I find that that correct science may elevate our understanding of the Quran, while the Quran illuminates our path toward scientific exploration. This is indeed what I believe. And from my experience, this has been always the case. There is large number of studies, traditional studies about the Quran and the interpretations. We have nearly perhaps more than 100 tafsir. And this will be a very good resource for our project. AI can deepen our understanding, for sure, but there challenges stand. There are many challenges in such an endeavor. The Quran is sacred. By the way, there are 3 sacred things: Allah, the Quran, and Muhammad. The rest is not sacred. Even scholars, great scholars, jurisprudence, etc., they are not sacred. So we should not be tied up to what the Salaf has said. Second, Quran is a primary source for Islamic law, and that's why we should care about interpreting the verses as much as we can of accuracy. And as I said, the natural language processing has advanced from the perspective of the natural language processing. The Quran is a collection of data. It's composed of about 80,000 words. But then it is important sometimes to preserve the original Arabic text. That's why the question, I mean, the previous speaker was pointing to, and Dr. Qasqas also pointed to, the translation from Arabic to English may help, by the way, in some cases, in the processing of the interpretations. But every time we have to resort to the original Arabic. Well, here we have some crucial issues to be considered. First is reconciling what seemingly similar verses. And here again, I come to synonyms, whether walid means ab, or ab doesn't mean walid sometimes, or it means whether Quran means dhikr or Quran means kitab. Or this is a very subtle point that has been raised in recent years, that the Quran does not mean by the kitab is not the Quran. The Quran is something else and the kitab is something else. This is not quite accurate, by the way, and cannot be taken as general as has been suggested. One. Second, we have to resolve apparent contradictions also that comes in this case. And we have to analyze the overlap with other scriptures. There is, as we know, an overlap with other scriptures. You know, just for your surprise, once I was discussing the question of interpreting the verse وإن يوما عند ربك كألف سنة مما تعدون with a Christian colleague. He was a professor of mathematics. And when I finished my explanation, etc., he said, well, but we have the same verse in the Bible. It says ويوم في عيني الرب كألف سنة وألف سنة كيوم واحد. I was caught by a surprise indeed, because I found that all what I was saying is not meaningless, or not meaningless, it doesn't have any great value as long as it is already has been said. But after a few seconds, I realized there is something missing in the verse or in the sentence of the Bible. So I asked my colleague, is the sentence you told me complete? By the way, he was a priest at the same time, ordained priest. Plus he was a professor of mathematics. He said, yes, complete. ويوم في عيني الرب كألف سنة وألف سنة كيوم واحد. A day in the eyes of God is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is like one day. Is that full stop? He said, full stop. I said, haha, it's missing. He said, why? Where is the reference? Where is the reference of 1,000 years? In the Quran, we have مما تعدون. In the Bible, there is no مما تعدون. How can I then interpret or can say that what is in the Quran is just repetition of what is in the Bible? It is not a repetition. Could be, but then the priest said, my colleague said, but why is that? I said, because they are from the same source. The Bible and the Quran and the Torah are from the same source. It's only because those who were scribing the Bible have missed perhaps the sentence مما تعدون. That's the point. Anyway, but that can be also discussed. The other challenge or the crucial issue we have, at times when we want to interpret the Quran, we face or use hadith, and hadith needs authentication, and this is a big project also. We need also to establish, for this reason, rules for the interpretation and translation of the Quran. And this is perhaps the most important, the milestone in any progress that is expected to be made in the II service of the Quran, establishing rules for interpretation and translation. We can make use of the traditional rules, no doubt, but still we need some much more investigations, and perhaps we need to invent a new approach, methodology. Without a methodology, our work will not be very fruitful. We need to set clear rules in this case and discover the relationships and interconnections between the verses. And in this respect, I have utilized some of the quantum properties or aspects in looking at the Quran. Why is that? Because the Quran sometimes present the text in a fuzzy logic. Dr. Muhammad Zaki Muhammad Khidr has pointed to this long time ago, who is expert, by the way, in digital and translation, etc. Well, exploring, for example, what? For example, I find that exploring the entanglement and the text superposition in the Quranic verses is one good source of information. You will ask me what is entanglement. Then developing the algorithm to search for vocabulary and text relationship will be even more profound. In this case, we can establish the connections to the exact and useful meanings. And this will help us in broadest possible, to achieve the broadest possible understanding of the Quranic text. So what I have for the rules, what are the rules? What rules we can do? Rule number one is to identify premises of the text. The text could be, by the way, one ayah or many ayat. The text could be ayah, one verse, or many verses. Second, we have to determine the focus of the premises. Each premise of, I will give an example later. What is the premise? After identifying the premise, I have to determine the focus of that premise. Then we have to consider the context before and after. Then we have to distinguish between specific and general, whether the verse is specific to certain case or is it general. and by the way, in this case, I don't take عموم النص يغني عن خصوص السبب. This is not any more valid, by the way. خصوص السبب sometimes is very important. The other role is to distinguish the time, and the time is important, and then diagnose the situation. Then we have to consider the repetition. Some vocabulary has been repeated in several other verses with the same meaning or different meanings. We have also to compare with similar verses. Result: we have to detect entanglements and correlation. Entanglement, I should define for you, by the way, in a physical term. Entanglement is a physics term which I have borrowed from quantum mechanics. It means that you have two verses. Let us apply it to Qur'an. Two verses which contain certain conditions which goes mutual. This is different from the case of a conditional relationship. Entanglement means the existence of a mutual obligation between two words or sentences in the implied ruling or the verse, let us say. This obligation is different from the condition attached to, say, an order, because it has a common consistency between the two terms, while the necessary condition or the conditional verse is one way. The entanglement is a two-way action. A change in one term or a state will imply immediate change in the other state. I will give an example, by the way, from the example from Surah An-Nisa and verse 34. This is a big controversial verse nowadays because it is related to the women. It says الرجال قوامون على النساء بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض وبما أنفقوا من أموالهم. This is premise number 1. فالصالحات قانتات حافظات للغيب مما حفظ الله واللاتي تخافون نشوزهن فعظوهن واهجروهن في المضاجع واضربوهن فإن أطعنكم فلا تبغوا عليهن سبيلا إن الله كان عليا كبيرا. Perhaps I have chosen a very delicate and subtle verse number 34 in Surah An-Nisa. But you see here, we have 3 premises. رجال قوامون على النساء. How? بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض وبما أنفقوا من أموالهم. بما أنفقوا من أموالهم, what they have spent. First, the second premises is defining فالصالحات قانتات حافظات للغيب بما فضل الله. And the third, and here we have in the third verse, واللاتي تخافون نشوزهن. The word نشوزهن is not very common in the Quran. And it is a conditional. واللاتي تخافون نشوزهن فعظوهن واهجروهن في المضاجع واضربوهن. And this is a very severe word or a strong word, واضربوهن. And many people would not accept that in this age. But if you analyze and see the entanglement between the text, there is some mutual entanglement, by the way. For example, men are custodian of the women, is entangled with what we have, with what they are spending. So you should not consider قوامون just like that, out of the blue, coming out of the... قوامون is coming from their spending on the women. And that's why now to Dr. Aitani and Dr. Qasqas, we'll discuss that. قوامون is a conditional in this case. So it's not easy to translate it just by the word, any word. It should, the word you translate the word قوامون into English, for example, it should cover the sustainment. And that is why I have put it custodians of the women. I chose to have men are custodians of the women. And this is entangled with what they have spent. If they don't spend, they are not custodian. And that's why we have to be very careful here, and because it will imply something else, maybe. Also, we have the superposition. The superposition is actually meant to be, I am cutting it short, a lot of many things. Basically, superposition means having two or more states or sentences, verses, or sentences rather, being added up to form a new state containing the elements of those states. By the way, if we consider now, to cut short, if we consider these two aspects of the Quranic verses, the entanglement and the superposition of verses, we can definitely understand many new things in the Quran. By the way, recently my friend, Dr. Al-Habbal, Muhammad Jamil Al-Habbal, has investigated Surah Al-Rahman. And he wanted to find this sort of entanglement between the verse which has been repeated 31 times. فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ 31 times in Surah Al-Rahman. And he found beautiful things. I have no time, unfortunately, to show that. In summary, in conclusion, and I'm sorry if I have exceeded the time with a little bit, in summary, I can say the following. In conclusion, let us say, artificial intelligence has numerous features through which we can serve the Holy Quran. It is a fertile field for a future development. In this article, we have suggested some guidelines for using AI technologies in the studies of the Quran. The novel contribution of this article comes in suggesting some of the relational features in Quranic verses, exploiting some features from quantum mechanics. Those features can be used by AI to deeper understanding. Artificial intelligence method must be applied widely, and the result should will be assessed with the human efforts, and is in full collaboration between those specialists in studies of the Holy Quran, the Arabic language specialist, and the specialist in the information technology and AI.